The next speaker is a leader of an organization that plays an incredibly important role in the future of coffee. Vern Long is the CEO of World Coffee Research, a global, collaborative, agricultural R&D organization for coffee. With a combination of her academic accomplishments in plant genetics at the Cornell University, 25 years of experience in international research with a focus on smallholder producers, and with a tenure as a director of the Office for International Agricultural Policy at the USAID, I think she's a perfect fit to lead the organization that builds the foundations of sustainability.
So please, everybody, give a warm welcome to Vern Long.
Is there a clicker? Yes. Okay. Okay, thank you. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much to Probat for inviting me to share some ideas with you all today. And I look forward to a robust conversation in the hallways during the breaks and over lunch. So if some of the things that I offered today sound interesting and you'd like to understand more of how we think about this at World Coffee Research and among our member companies, I encourage you to reach out to us. So in the audience, actually, there are a number of companies who are already members of WCR. And so what I'm going to be talking about today is really their work to transition this house of cards that we have, which I'll talk a bit more about what I mean by the house of cards, and the work that our member companies are doing to really address this fundamental challenge. So my first thanks is to Probat, who's also a member of WCR, but to the member companies of WCR who are part of the fundamental solution to change what I'm going to describe. So one of the challenges we have in coffee, and we know that there are many, the sustainability talks, the discussions you've had, what you see at Origin, what the challenges you face in your roasting plants, all of these challenges are also addressed by innovation. So when we think about the innovations that are developed to solve your problems, whether it's digitalization of data and software tools, or the technology that was just described by Sebastian and their third colleague, Sebastian, who also has some insights on how to solve your problems. One of the challenges we have in coffee production is that over billions of kilos of coffee are produced every year. But when you think about where it comes from a tree, yes, we all know that. But when we think about the diversity of those trees, the different varieties that yield those billions of kilos of coffee, it's only 111 varieties at the base of our pyramid producing the coffee for us. When you measure innovation in agriculture, one of the best ways to look at innovation in plant varieties is variety registration. So when a plant breeder develops a new variety, they can register in UPOV. So it's not a perfect system for evaluating the total innovation in a crop, but it's a really good measure. It's a good proxy for the level of investment and innovation that exists. In strawberries, there are over 6,600 varieties of strawberries. There are strawberries for jam, there are strawberries for fruit salad, there are strawberries for display, there are strawberries to be dipped in chocolate. There are so many different kinds of strawberries. But when you think about the market value of strawberries compared to coffee, and when you compare the number of varieties, the amount of innovation in strawberries for agricultural applications versus coffee, it's astounding when you think about this. In coffee, we only have 111 registered varieties of coffee around the world. And this is a global crop produced in many, many countries with very different production environments, which each production environment benefits from having a coffee variety or multiple varieties that respond to those diverse production environments. So when you really start to think about this, you realize how seriously under-innovated we are in coffee. For those of you who really want to understand what I'm talking about, most of you spend many of your days in processing plants and may not think about the trees in the field. So I hope this picture really helps explain what I'm talking about. The variety on the left is susceptible to coffee leaf rust. That's a fungal infection that to a coffee tree is like the COVID It's the COVID of coffee. It is devastating. It causes tremendous yield losses. You can see all the leaves fell off the tree on the left because it was susceptible to this disease. And the consequence is that the farmer's yield is very, very low from those trees on the left. If the farmer wants to have a yield from these trees that are susceptible, they have other technology options. They can spray with fungicides. But as we know, as importers of coffee or users of coffee, residue levels could create a problem for us, depending on which country you're in and whether the residue stays. So this technology on the left, when we talk about technology in agriculture, the variety is our technology. That variety on the left is not a good deal for farmers. They have to pay for fungicides to get a harvest. And if they don't use fungicide, they have real risk if their plant has no yield. The variety on the right is resistant. And you can develop this variety with a very simple tool, a paintbrush. It's not very high tech. You take the pollen from one tree and you put it on the other tree, and that seed is a material you use, is the input we use in plant breeding to make a new variety. So we're not even talking about genetic engineering or other tools that other crops might use. In coffee, we're just talking about a paintbrush. And with a paintbrush, you can do tremendous things like create a variety that's resistant to coffee leaf rust. And you can imagine the tree on the right, you don't have to spray with pesticides, you don't have additional cost. It doesn't generate residues then, because when you export the product, there was never fungicide in its production. And it's going to have a high yield. All those leaves are going to help that plant produce a high yield. So this very simple technology is the foundation of most agriculture around the world. Varieties are an incredibly powerful technology. And I hope this picture helps you just really internalize just how powerful this type of technology can be. And it's kind of amazing we can generate it with just a paintbrush. So if we take a look now at sort of the growth in yield over the last 50, 60 years, you can see that countries like Brazil, Colombia, Vietnam have done a tremendous job. And I think Christina spoke to us earlier about the investments that are made to tremendously improve productivity on the farm. And these kinds of investments have been very powerful for countries that have invested in that productivity investment. But you can see that many countries remain flat. WCR works with countries that have invested less or had the inability or limitations on investing in agricultural research to drive productivity. And for farmers, if they can't improve their yields and they're exposed to the risk, like in the picture I showed before, the likelihood that they'll stay in coffee agriculture is quite limited. So in addition to this current status of flat productivity, we're also now being faced with a climate crisis that's creating tremendous variability in production environments. One year it's cold, one year it's hot, one year it's wet, one year it's dry. And so we need innovation that is more resilient in the face of climate change. We need varieties that can withstand the challenges that are ahead of us. And when there was a farmer who actually testified in the US Congress in 2017, and he came to talk about the importance of research to the congressional representatives. And he explains that what a farmer really needs are sun and rain, the elements that nature can bring and the challenges that nature can bring. And when you have those challenges from nature, research has been a critical tool set or toolkit to go to solve those challenges. If there's too much rain, if there's too much sun, if there are pests and diseases coming, research is what helps calibrate the farmer's ability to respond to those challenges in production. So when we think about what we're doing in coffee, I think these pictures really sum it up. What we're doing right now, if you look at the total global investment levels in coffee agricultural research, it's not very much. And we're pretty much just waiting for the climate crisis to come and exacerbate what we're dealing with. What we need to be doing as an industry at a global level, as a community of coffee, is to really focus on the investment that will help create our climate change boat, the contingency house that helps us have the technology to ensure that farmers are able to withstand the constraints of this very variable environment, but also that the industry has a supply of coffee that enables the many amazing opportunities, experiences, consumer experiences to move forward. So the evidence is clear. This document was developed by the World Bank to analyze the data over the last 100 years, and they looked at how all of the different types of investments have contributed to prosperity among smallholder farmers. And the evidence is overwhelming across many different countries, across many different commodities, that agricultural research and development is a tremendously efficient investment to drive productivity for smallholder farmers, that productivity drives economic growth and ultimately resource conservation as well. And agriculture-led economic growth is one of the most effective means of contributing to poverty reduction. So when we think about the big challenges facing our industry, coffee is one sector of the agricultural economy of many of the countries on whom we depend. And so governments have to make priorities. Will they invest in coffee research? Will they invest in rice research or fruits and vegetables research? And those investment levels can be decided by models that have been developed by economists. And building on this seminal work of harvesting prosperity, a report was just released a couple weeks ago by the International Food Policy Research Institute that actually tells us about how much investment makes sense in all of the different commodities to optimize our poverty reduction goals. So that's a global objective that we have. But within coffee, we also know that we would benefit tremendously by investing in agricultural R&D, not just to reduce poverty among smallholder producers, but to stabilize supply, reduce risk for farmers, and many of the other benefits of engaging in a productive and effective economic sector. So we in the industry, we say tomato, and we talk about sustainability goals. When you talk to government economists, as you know, I used to work in the government, and we talked about, what's the efficient allocation of investment in, tomatoes versus corn versus soybeans. And they just talk about agricultural GDP growth. It's the same thing. The agenda that we have as an industry, we want to achieve sustainability goals and economic opportunity for farmers and have a robust and stable supply of coffee for our industry. The economists who are doing these analyses are telling us over and over again, yes, if you want to drive that productivity growth, agricultural R&D is a really effective means. And I think we're really aligned. When we think about what is the right amount of R&D investment then, there are many investments that need to be made. And I am not saying that R&D should come at the expense of other types of investments. But there's a rule of thumb that most economists use when making these strategic prioritization. That's about 1% of farm gate value. For in our case, it would be global production value, and we might just focus on exports. So as an industry, we could say that if we all agree that about $20 billion of global export value, then the right amount of investment at a global level would be around $200 million. So that's the number. And when you think about all of the different organizations that are contributing to coffee R&D, national coffee institutes that contribute to R&D like the FNC was describing this morning, we have the investments of Nestlé and other research organizations that provide agricultural research investment. But even if you add up all of those from our estimates of working with national coffee institutes, we still have about a $100 million investment gap in agricultural R&D to support our crop. And in the end, you get what you pay for. So when we think about just in the US, the estimates that the US Department of Agriculture has made about the relative investment in the private sector for the seed business in maize and the seed business in soybeans, the private sector invests about $780 million a year just in the US for corn variety development, just for variety development. And in soybeans, about $460 million a year just for soybean development, varieties. We're not talking about anything else, just variety development in the US. So when we think about our levels of investment in coffee at a global level, and we estimate it at around $100 million, you start to see the differences in the investment levels. And so there's a long, colorful history on the choices made in maize production and soybean production. But at the end of the day, you can choose the kind of production system that you want to have, and you can develop the technology to that goal. And so when I think about what we can do together as an industry, we can just take a first step and recognize that we rely on coffee. And if we depend on coffee for our industry, we depend on coffee agriculture to succeed. And it needs to succeed for everyone along the supply chain, starting with the farmers all the way through the supply chain. And so this house of cards really does need to be slowly replaced with more substantial construction material. So when we think about the past, our industry has depended on the investments of national coffee institutes that have been financing this investment and this innovation for the last 100+ years to develop the innovation farmers need. But there have been limitations, and as we face the climate crisis in the years ahead, the need for greater investment to tackle the challenges will only grow greater and more urgent. And so today, what we're doing at WCR with our member companies is to define that shared investment agenda. What is it that we as an industry want to see? Do we want to see diversity of origins? Do we want many countries to successfully produce and export coffee? And work with the public sector, and this is both the public sector in producing countries to understand how we can align our shared agenda for successful coffee production and coffee exports, as well as the public sector in consuming countries where there is investment in science and technology, and to mobilize that investment towards a shared agenda. So when I referred to this report that came out a couple of weeks ago at the International Food Policy Research Institute, the exciting part about that report is that if at a global level, and developed country governments, so high-income governments from Japan, South Korea, Australia, the US, Canada, European countries, UK, have all invest about $1 billion a year on international agricultural research. They do it together. And so they commissioned this report to understand how should they allocate that $1 billion towards agricultural research investment. And so this report is really guiding those choices. How much should go to cassava? How much should go to cash crops? How much should go to cereal staples? And so that investment report is really valuable for us because we can look at it to see what makes sense as an industry to complement that public investment. And this is the dialogue that I seek to foster and catalyze with our member companies and your respective governments to clarify what's our role as an industry and what's the role of the public sector, and to work in producing countries to identify what that shared agenda is, both the financing of the agenda and defining the research needs that each National Coffee Institute is trying to clarify and define for their farmers. And so when we think about the future, so that we have this lovely cup of coffee, and I'm so excited that my communications director put a cup of coffee there in deference to our discussions of at the end of the day, our consumers want to have a beautiful cup of coffee and feel good about it. And by mobilizing this investment, defining a shared agenda and working together, we can all very comfortably sit and drink our wonderful cup of coffee by having a shared commitment to the goals of the future. And so I just leave you with this point, that if we really want to build a house that will last, that we need to mobilize agricultural science investments. And those could be through private investment, they can be through shared collaboration investments. And this is a model that we talk about a lot at WCR, so this will be the last idea that I leave you with, is around a co-opetition model. We realize that exporting countries are in competition with each other. Roasters are in competition with each other. Many actors along our supply chain are in competition with each other. But we are collectively facing a tremendous threat to our beloved crop and to our industry. And so there are moments when collaboration and cooperation are really critical. And so the model of research collaboration that WCR develops and implements is what we call a co-opetition model. It's cooperation that allows for competition. And so that national coffee institutes can engage in collaborative research with their partners while maintaining their own competitive position in the market. And that's really important. And I think that this is a principle that as we look forward to the challenges of the future, we need to develop more of these co-opetition models so that we can continue to take advantage of the opportunity and the incentives of the market system, but realize that some of these challenges are much bigger than what any single company or any single government can handle alone. And with that, I leave you.
Yes, I'm sorry. I have to. I'm not on the program right now, and I have to come here now because for me, what we saw. And I heard the speech of Vern. What we saw the last 1.5 days. We tried to to showcase all different aspects of coffee. But what it all comes down to is our supply chain. And I have to admit, a couple of years ago, we as Probat, we are machinery manufacturers. I'm sitting in the board of the German Machinery Manufacturers Association. We talk about steel prices and all that. Nobody cares about coffee, of course. And we as Probat, we thought, well, actually, yes, we serve kind of the coffee industry, but we are steel manufacturers. We do machinery. So I listened to a lot of speeches 15, 20 years back at the SCA in Boston, and James mentioned this yesterday. And I talked with Doug, and Doug actually was the one who said, well, you need to invest in WCR. You need to be part of that. Or Bill, where we thought, well, we need to be part of what Bill and his team is doing in UC Davis. But actually, we are only a sidekick of the coffee industry. Because yes, we live from selling you coffee roasters, coffee grinders, and all the digital solutions we showcase today. But when I heard Vern and Christina this morning, we need to make sure that we will still have coffee when our children are doing the business we do right now. And this is, we need to come together in this group and in all different groups we are in to make sure that our crop, that coffee, this is what we love, is still available over the next decades and centuries. And I have to, like Christina said in a small slide today was, well, actually, you Europeans, and we have another nice German Lieferketten-Sorgfaltspflichtgesetz. It's a great German word, huh? And we have the deforestation regulations by the EU and all of that. And we leave this to the farmers. We leave this to origin. So, well, you do this, and we don't care. We just buy from your coffee, and if you don't follow our regulations, we cannot buy anymore by you. But that's your problem, not ours. But that's not right. It is our problem. It's all our problem, and we have to make sure that our supply chain in coffee, that we all work together, and we all enjoy our market for the next decades and centuries. And I had to say this today because it's so important for me. Thank you very much.